The massive alien ship hung in space like a silent predator, its dark hull absorbing the light from distant stars. Inside the observation deck, senior researcher Vorthak stretched his 6 tentacles across the glowing control panels. His species had been studying other life forms for over 3,000 years, and this was supposed to be just another routine job. Another primitive world, he muttered, watching the blue and green planet spinning lazily below them, probably still hitting rocks together to make fire. His assistant, Quelith, who looked like a living crystal with too many eyes, flickered with amusement. The preliminary scans show they've discovered metal working, Vorthak. They might even have basic mathematics. Vorthak snorted through his breathing slits. Every species thought they were special when they first figured out how to melt copper. These humans would be no different. He'd write up the standard report, file it with the Galactic Council, and move on to the next world. Simple work for simple creatures. But as soon as the deep scanning began, something felt wrong. The first readings made no sense. These humans were supposed to be fragile little things, barely able to survive on their own planet. Yet the scanners showed them living in environments that should have killed them instantly. Some were surviving in frozen wastelands where the temperature dropped low enough to freeze most alien blood. Others thrived in deserts so hot that Vorthak's own species would cook alive in minutes. Quelith, run the environmental scans again, Vorthak ordered, his tentacles twitching with confusion. These readings can't be right. The crystal being's many eyes focused on the data streams. I've run them 4 times, Vorthak. The humans appear to be living successfully in climate zones that span nearly their entire planet's temperature range. This wasn't normal. Most species evolved to handle one specific environment. The ice dwellers stayed on ice worlds. The desert. Species stayed in hot zones. But humans seemed to adapt to anything their planet threw at them. It was like they were designed to survive everywhere. The behavioral scans were even more puzzling. Vorthak watched in amazement as humans engaged in activities that made no evolutionary sense. Groups of them would gather to throw their bodies against each other in organized violence, then celebrate together afterward. They consumed substances that were clearly toxic to their systems, not for medicine, but for enjoyment. Some even jumped off perfectly safe high places with nothing but fabric strapped to their backs. Are they trying to kill themselves? Quelith asked, watching a human leap from an aircraft thousands of feet above the ground. I don't think so, Vorthak replied slowly. Look at their physiological responses. Their stress hormones are elevated, but they're also producing pleasure chemicals. They're enjoying this. The more they watched, the more impossible humans became. Their cities were built in the most dangerous places possible, on fault lines where the ground shook regularly, next to mountains that spewed molten rock, in areas regularly hit by massive spinning storms that could level buildings. Any sane species would avoid such places, but humans seemed drawn to them. Sir, Quelith's voice carried a note of worry. I'm detecting something unusual about their technology development curve. Vorthak examined the historical data his scanners had compiled. Human advancement wasn't following normal patterns. Most species developed slowly, carefully, taking thousands of years to move from basic tools to spaceflight. Humans had gone from riding animals to landing on their moon in less than a century. Their technology was accelerating at an impossible rate. They're not just adapting to their environment, Vorthak whispered, a chill running through his body. They're changing it to suit them, then adapting again when it becomes too easy. The observation continued for several more cycles, and each new discovery was more disturbing than the last. Humans had eliminated most of their natural predators, then created artificial ones. They'd cured diseases, then invented new challenges to replace them. They'd built machines to make their lives easier, then used their free time to make their lives more dangerous. But the moment that changed everything came when Vorthak was reviewing their military capabilities. He expected to find the usual primitive weapons, maybe some basic explosives. Instead, he found arsenals capable of destroying their entire planet several times over. Yet somehow they hadn't used them. They possessed the ultimate power of destruction and chose restraint. Impossible, he breathed. That's when every alarm on the ship began screaming at once. Quelith's panicked voice cut through the noise. Vorthak, proximity alert. Something's approaching fast. On the main display, a small human vessel appeared, moving far faster than their technology should have allowed. The ship itself was primitive compared to Galactic Council standards, but it had found them. Somehow these supposedly backward humans had detected their cloaked observation ship across impossible distances. The communication system crackled too. Life with a calm, confident human voice speaking perfect galactic standard. Unknown vessel, this is Captain Lee Minho of the human ship New Dawn. We've been expecting you. Permission to come aboard for diplomatic discussions? Vorthak stared at the communication panel in shock. No species had ever detected their cloaked ships before. No primitive civilization had ever learned galactic standard without first contact. And no species had ever calmly requested a meeting with their secret observers. As he reached for the communication controls with a trembling tentacle, Vorthak realized this wasn't going to be another routine assignment. Humanity was about to change everything. Dr. Zephyra Kethlin materialized on the observation deck 3 days after the initial contact incident. Her species had evolved beyond emotions millions of years ago, replacing feelings with pure logical thought. Fear was supposed to be impossible for her kind. Yet as she reviewed the human data files, something uncomfortably close to terror crept through her consciousness. "Researcher Vorthak," she said, her voice carrying harmonic undertones that betrayed her distress. "Please tell me these biological readings are the result of equipment malfunction." Vorthak's tentacles drooped with exhaustion. He'd been running scans continuously since the human ship had somehow found them. "I've checked and rechecked everything, Doctor. Our equipment is functioning perfectly. The readings are accurate." Dr. Kethlin's crystalline form flickered as she processed the impossibility before her. In her 3,000 years of studying alien biology, she'd never encountered anything like this. Humans weren't just defying the laws of evolution, they were spitting in evolution's face and laughing about it. The first anomaly was their temperature tolerance. Most species could survive within a narrow range of maybe 20 degrees. Humans regularly functioned across temperature ranges that spanned over 100 degrees. She watched in amazement as thermal imaging showed a human designated as Park Jiwoo, stepping from a heated building into freezing snow, wearing minimal clothing and continuing her activities without any apparent distress. "How is this possible?" Dr. Kethlin whispered. "Her core body temperature should be dropping to fatal levels." "Watch this," Quilith said, projecting another thermal scan. This one showed humans in what they called a sauna, essentially a small room heated to temperatures that would cook most alien flesh. The humans sat there voluntarily, sweating profusely, and appeared to be enjoying themselves. Then they ran outside and jumped into frozen water. "They're torturing themselves for pleasure," Dr. Kethlin observed, her logical mind struggling to process this information. The cardiovascular impossibilities were even more disturbing. Human hearts were simple four-chamber organs that should fail under extreme stress. Instead, they seemed to grow stronger when pushed beyond normal limits. Subjects regularly engaged in activities that elevated their heart rates to levels that would be fatal for most species, then did it again the next day. She watched footage of a human female named Kim So-min running continuously for over 2 hours. Her heart rate reached levels that should have caused immediate cardiac arrest. Instead, she finished the activity, smiled at the recording device, and announced she felt great. "Their pain tolerance is equally impossible," Vorthak added, pulling up medical scans. "Observe this subject, Choi Woo-jin." The footage showed a human male voluntarily allowing others to strike him repeatedly during what they called martial arts training. The bone density scans revealed multiple healed fractures throughout his skeleton. Instead of making him weaker, each break had healed stronger than before. "They're literally breaking themselves to become more durable," Dr. Kethlin said, her voice barely above a whisper. But the truly terrifying discoveries came when they analyzed human dietary habits. The chemical analysis revealed that humans regularly consumed substances that would be deadly toxins to most galactic species. Caffeine, which they consumed daily, in massive quantities, was a powerful insecticide that should have killed them instantly. Capsaicin found in their spicy foods was a defense mechanism plants developed specifically to prevent consumption. Humans ate it for fun. "Look at this," Quelleth projected the analysis of human alcohol consumption. They're voluntarily poisoning their neural systems with ethyl alcohol, then building tolerance to consume even more. Dr. Kethlin watched in horror as humans gathered in social groups to consume increasing amounts of this poison while celebrating. Their motor functions deteriorated, their judgment became impaired, and they acted as if this was an enjoyable experience. Most disturbing of all, their bodies had developed sophisticated mechanisms to process and eliminate these toxins, suggesting they'd been doing this for thousands of years. The psychological profiles were equally impossible. Pain and stress that would drive most species insane seemed to make humans more focused and determined. She observed subjects deliberately placing themselves in dangerous situations, jumping from aircraft, climbing vertical rock faces, racing vehicles at deadly speeds, and exhibiting clear signs of enjoyment throughout the process. Their stress hormones spike during these activities, she noted, but so do their pleasure chemicals. They've somehow rewired their brains to find joy in situations that should trigger survival responses. One particularly disturbing case study involved a human named Lee Hee-jin, who had survived what should have been a fatal accident. The medical scans showed extensive injuries that would have killed most species instantly. Not only had she survived, but she'd recovered completely and returned to the same dangerous activity that had nearly killed her. They don't just adapt to trauma, Dr. Kethlin concluded. They seek it out. The final piece of evidence came from their reproductive biology. Most species became more cautious when protecting offspring. Human parents did the opposite. They deliberately exposed their young to controlled dangers, teaching them to swim in deep water, climb high structures, even engage in competitive physical combat. The children showed the same impossible resilience as the adults, suggesting these traits were being actively cultivated. "Doctor," Vorthak said quietly, "I'm beginning to think we're not looking at a naturally evolved species." Dr. Kethlin's form flickered with something approaching panic. "That's exactly what I'm afraid of. These physiological impossibilities suggest artificial engineering. But who would create such beings and why?" As she prepared her report for the Galactic Council, one terrifying possibility kept surfacing in her logical mind. Humans hadn't just evolved to survive. They'd been designed to thrive in any environment, overcome any obstacle, and adapt to any threat. They were living weapons wrapped in flesh, and they didn't even seem to know it. Anthropologist Vex Torith had spent her career studying over 40,000 different sapient species across the galaxy. She'd seen hive minds that operated as single entities, solitary species that rarely interacted with their own kind, and everything in between. She thought she'd seen every possible way intelligent life could organize itself. She was wrong. Standing before the emergency council session, her 6 eyes darted nervously between the assembled delegates. The human social structure data she'd compiled over the past weeks defied every model of civilization development ever recorded. "Honored council members," she began, her voice crackling with uncertainty, "I must report that human society operates on principles that should be impossible." The first anomaly was their tribal behavior. Most species either formed large unified groups or remained in small family units. Humans did both simultaneously. They organized themselves into countless smaller groups based on geography, beliefs, interests, and genetics, yet somehow maintained planet-wide cooperation on massive projects. "Observe this phenomenon they call the International Space Station," Vex Torith said, projecting holographic displays. "Multiple human tribes that have been in active conflict with each other for centuries, collaborated to build and maintain a permanent orbital facility. They literally fought wars on their planet's surface while working together in space." The council members shifted uncomfortably. This violated every principle of tribal psychology they understood. But the deeper she dug into human society, the more impossible it became. Their information networks should have created a hive mind effect, with individual thoughts merging into collective consciousness. Instead, these networks seemed to strengthen individual identity, while simultaneously allowing unprecedented cooperation. She'd observed a human female named Kim So-min, who worked as what they called a teacher. During the day, she nurtured and educated human offspring, with remarkable patience and care. In the evening, she trained in armed combat techniques with lethal efficiency. On weekends, she volunteered to help strangers, while also competing in contests where others tried to physically defeat her. The same individual exhibits nurturing, warrior, competitive, and altruistic behaviors in rapid succession, Vextoreth explained. Our models suggest these personality traits should be mutually exclusive. Another case study involved Choi Woo-jin, a human who created artistic works that moved other humans to tears with their beauty. The same individual also participated in organized combat sports, where opponents attempted to render him unconscious. When asked about this contradiction, he'd simply stated that both activities made him feel alive. The economic data was equally baffling. Humans had developed systems where individuals competed fiercely for resources while simultaneously creating mechanisms to ensure no member of their species starved. They accumulated wealth individually, while pooling resources for collective projects that benefited everyone. They've essentially gamified survival, Vextoreth continued. Competition drives innovation, but cooperation ensures species survival. It's brilliant and terrifying. The military structures were perhaps the most disturbing aspect. Human armed forces displayed loyalty and discipline that surpassed even the most militaristic species in the galaxy. Yet these same forces regularly disobeyed orders they deemed immoral, suggesting individual judgment superseded group thinking even in hierarchical structures. She documented cases where human soldiers had risked their own lives to protect enemy civilians during conflicts. This violated every principle of warfare psychology ever recorded. Warriors were supposed to dehumanize opponents, not extend protection to them. Their capacity for simultaneous tribalism and universalism appears unlimited, she noted. They'll die for their small group while sacrificing for complete strangers. The technological implications were staggering. Most species develop technology slowly, through careful collaboration and risk assessment. Humans seem to thrive on competitive innovation. They'd share basic scientific discoveries freely while competing to develop applications first. This created an acceleration effect where technology advanced exponentially rather than linearly. Their approach to problem-solving defied all logic. When faced with challenges, most species either adapted themselves to the environment or modified the environment to suit their needs. Humans did both simultaneously, then created new challenges to test their adaptations. Subject Han Jimin encountered a complex engineering problem that our predictive models suggested had no solution, Vextoreth reported. Her approach was to, quote, hit it with a bigger hammer. The solution worked perfectly. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of human society was their approach to education. Most species taught their young to avoid danger and seek safety. Humans deliberately exposed their offspring to controlled risks, teaching them to evaluate threats and make independent decisions rather than follow predetermined responses. She'd observed human children engaging in activities that would traumatize most alien youth. They competed against each other in physical contests, solved complex problems independently, and were encouraged to question authority figures, including their own parents. The result was a species of individuals capable of rapid adaptation and innovative thinking. They're not just raising offspring, Vextoreth concluded. They're manufacturing problem solvers. The communication patterns were equally impossible. Humans had developed global information networks that should have created uniform thinking. Instead, these networks amplified diverse perspectives while somehow maintaining enough common ground for continued cooperation. They argued constantly about everything, yet managed to coordinate responses to species-level threats with remarkable efficiency. Their debates seemed to strengthen rather than weaken their collective decision-making capabilities. Council members, Vextoreth said, her voice heavy with implications. I believe we're observing a species that has somehow evolved beyond the traditional constraints of social organization. They've created a system that simultaneously maximizes individual potential and collective capability. The silence in the council chamber was deafening. Finally, the presiding mind spoke. Are you suggesting these humans represent a new form of sapient evolution? Vextoreth's multiple eyes focused on the question. I'm suggesting something far more disturbing. They're not just evolving socially. They're actively engineering their own social evolution, and they're doing it faster than any species should be able to adapt. As she prepared to leave the podium, one final thought chilled her to the core. Humans weren't just organizing themselves efficiently, they were creating a social structure specifically designed to produce individuals capable of solving any problem, overcoming any obstacle, and adapting to any challenge. They were turning their entire civilization into a weapon of infinite potential. Fleet Commander Thekvarian had personally ordered the destruction of 17 worlds in his military career. Each decision had been calculated, necessary, and executed without hesitation. His warrior caste had evolved specifically for making hard choices that protected galactic civilization. He'd never lost sleep over any of them, until now. The complete human assessment files lay spread across his command chamber in holographic displays that painted the walls with impossible data. Every report told the same story from different angles, and that story was keeping him awake during his rest cycles. His forearms clicked nervously against his command throne as he reviewed the evidence for the 100th time. "Commander," his aide approached cautiously, "the Nightmare Classification Committee is waiting for your decision." Thekvarian's compound eyes fixed on the aide. The Nightmare Classification existed for exactly one purpose: identifying species that posed existential threats to galactic stability. In 3,000 years of galactic civilization, only 12 species had ever received this designation. Most had been extinct for millennia. He was about to make it 13. The biological evidence alone was damning enough. Humans exhibited every characteristic his military strategists associated with engineered weapon species: rapid adaptation under pressure that turned environmental threats into advantages, pain tolerance that bordered on immunity, stress responses that actually improved performance rather than degrading it, but the behavioral patterns were what truly terrified him. "Display case study, Han Ji-min, structural engineer," he commanded. The hologram showed a human female facing what the analysis called an impossible engineering challenge. Standard protocol would involve careful study, multiple consultations, and gradual problem-solving approaches. Instead, Han Ji-min had stared at the problem for exactly 37 seconds, grabbed a larger tool, and solved it through what could only be described as controlled violence. "Computer, what was the probability of her solution working?" 0.0003%, Commander. Thekvarian's mandibles clicked with agitation. This wasn't luck. This was a pattern. Humans consistently achieved outcomes that mathematical models deemed impossible. They didn't just think outside conventional parameters. They seemed unaware that parameters existed at all. The technological acceleration data was even more disturbing. His analysts had created predictive models for human advancement based on their current development curve. The results suggested they would achieve faster-than-light travel within decades, not centuries. Their weapons technology was advancing even faster. "They've already developed planetary-scale destructive capability," his weapons specialist had reported. "Arsenal sufficient to destroy their homeworld multiple times over." "And?" Thekvarian had asked. "They haven't used it, sir, not once. Despite numerous conflicts that could have justified deployment, this was the part that made no sense. Weapon species were supposed to use their capabilities. That was their function. But humans possessed ultimate destructive power and chose restraint. It suggested a level of self-control that shouldn't exist in an engineered weapon, unless the restraint itself was part of the design. The social analysis had been the final piece of evidence. Humans organized themselves in ways that maximized both individual capability and collective potential. They competed and cooperated simultaneously, driving innovation while ensuring species survival. Their entire civilization appeared designed to produce problem solvers capable of adapting to any challenge. "Sir," his communications officer interrupted his thoughts, "we're receiving multiple alerts from the Sol system." Thekvarian's attention snapped to the tactical displays. The alerts showed dozens of human vessels appearing throughout their solar system, ships that shouldn't exist yet, moving faster than their technology should allow, using energy signatures that their scientists hadn't developed. "How long ago did we classify their technological level?" he asked quietly. 47 standard cycles, sir. 47 cycles. In less than 2 months, humans had advanced their technology by decades. They weren't just adapting, they were evolving in real time. Commander, his tactical officer's voice carried barely contained panic. The human vessels are broadcasting on frequencies we've never detected from their civilization before. They're requesting permission to dock. Thekvarian stared at the impossible readings. No species achieved this kind of technological leap without outside intervention. Either humans had help from an advanced civilization, or they were the advanced civilization hiding behind a primitive facade. Neither possibility was reassuring. What's their weapons status? He demanded. That's the strange part, sir. They're carrying minimal armaments. Most of their cargo appears to be gifts. Gifts. Weapon species didn't bring gifts. They brought destruction. But humans were approaching the most powerful military fleet in the galaxy, carrying presents like visiting relatives. The paradox crystallized in Thekvarian's mind. Humans exhibited every characteristic of an engineered weapon species, but they behaved like an engineered diplomacy species. They possessed the capability for unlimited destruction, but chose unlimited construction instead. They were biological impossibilities wrapped in social contradictions, advancing at technological rates that violated every known model. Sir, the Nightmare Classification Committee requires your decision. Thekvarian's forearms moved across his command interfaces with practiced efficiency. The classification protocols had been established for exactly this situation. When a species posed potential existential threat to galactic civilization, immediate containment was the only logical response. His fingers hovered over the authorization codes that would mobilize the entire galactic fleet. One decision would either save civilization from an unprecedented threat or destroy the most remarkable species ever discovered. But as he prepared to enter the codes, another thought occurred to him. What if the nightmare wasn't what humans might do to the galaxy? What if the nightmare was what the galaxy might do to humans? These impossible beings had achieved in centuries what other species took millennia to accomplish. They'd developed planet-killing weapons and chosen peace. They'd faced extinction-level challenges and turned them into opportunities for growth. They'd created a civilization specifically designed to produce individuals capable of overcoming any obstacle. And now they were approaching his warships carrying gifts. Classification nightmare. Threat level existential, he announced to his staff. But containment protocols are suspended pending direct diplomatic contact. His aide looked confused. Sir, that's not standard procedure for nightmare classifications. Thekvarian's compound eyes fixed on the approaching human vessels. Nothing about this situation is standard, aide. We're about to find out if our nightmares are justified, or if we're looking at something else entirely. As the first human ship requested docking permission, Thekvarian realized they were all about to discover whether humanity was a weapon, aimed at the galaxy, or a gift the galaxy had been waiting for without knowing it. The answer would determine the fate of everyone. The docking bay of the Galactic Council ship Judgment's Edge had never been prepared for a moment like this. Emergency protocols designed for first contact with potentially hostile species were activated throughout the massive vessel. Energy barriers hummed at full power. Armed security forces positioned themselves at strategic points. Medical teams stood ready for any biological contamination. Fleet Commander Thekvarian stood behind the primary energy shield, his forearms crossed in what his species considered a defensive posture. Beside him, Dr. Kethlyn's crystalline form flickered with nervous energy, while anthropologist Vextoreth Six Eyes tracked every sensor reading. The entire diplomatic team was present, along with enough firepower to level a small moon. They were all terrified. The human vessel Harmony completed its docking sequence with mechanical precision that impressed even the Council's engineers. For a supposedly primitive species, their technology interfaced seamlessly with advanced galactic systems. The airlock sealed with a soft hiss, and atmospheric readings confirmed the humans had somehow matched their ship's environment to Council standards perfectly. How did they know our atmospheric requirements? Dr. Kethlyn whispered. More importantly, Thekvarian muttered, how did they modify their ship's life support systems in the time it took to dock? The inner airlock door cycled open, and 3 humans stepped through. The first thing that struck every observer was how small they looked. After reviewing countless reports about human physical impossibilities, the council team had expected towering warriors or hulking monsters. Instead, they faced beings barely larger than themselves, moving with casual confidence that somehow made them seem more dangerous than any weapon. Leading the group was a human female who appeared completely at ease, despite facing the most powerful military force in known space. Her dark hair was pulled back in what humans called a practical style, and she wore a simple uniform that bore no visible weapons or armor. Yet every alien in the bay instinctively recognized her as the most dangerous being present. "Greetings," she said, her voice carrying a warmth that somehow made the energy barriers between them seem unnecessary. "I'm Captain Nam Soo-jin of the human ship Harmony. We know you've been studying us, and we'd like to return the favor." She spoke perfect galactic standard, with an accent none of them could identify. Her pronunciation was flawless, her grammar more precise than most council members achieved. Yet according to their records, no human had ever been exposed to their language before this moment. Behind her stood 2 other humans who seemed equally impossible. The male, who introduced himself as Yun Tai-ho, carried what appeared to be gifts, despite facing a potential military confrontation. The female, Lee Hye-jin, held a small device that was somehow scanning the entire council team simultaneously without triggering any of their security systems. "Your scanning device," Vextereth spoke up, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. "How is it bypassing our detection systems?" Lee Hye-jin smiled, an expression that showed her species' omnivorous teeth while somehow conveying nothing but friendliness. "We developed it based on the scanning patterns we detected from your observation ship. We figured if we're going to be friends, we should learn how to communicate properly." Friends. The word hung in the air like an impossible concept. These humans had been classified as existential threats to galactic civilization, yet they spoke of friendship as if it were the most natural thing in the universe. "Your records classify us as nightmares," Captain Nam continued, stepping closer to the energy barrier. "That's not entirely inaccurate. We are what we needed to become to survive our world and our history." She gestured casually, and every weapon system in the bay tracked the movement before recognizing it as non-threatening. The humans seemed genuinely unaware of the firepower focused on them. "But here's what your analysis couldn't predict," Nam continued. "We also became what we needed to become to choose friendship over conquest." Yun Tai-ho stepped forward and placed his cargo on the deck near the energy barrier. "I brought samples of human art, music, and something we call chocolate. Our anthropologists figured cultural exchange would be more productive than military posturing." The casual mention of human anthropologists sent a chill through the council team. These beings had been preparing for this moment just as carefully as the galactic military had. The difference was their preparation focused on building bridges rather than barriers. "We've been watching your observation ship for weeks," Lee Hye-jin added, her scanner continuing its gentle examination of the alien delegation. "Your technology is impressive, but we were more interested in understanding your intentions. It took a while to determine you weren't planning an invasion." Fleet Commander Thekvarion's mandibles clicked with nervous energy. "How did you detect our cloaked vessel? Our stealth technology is beyond your current capabilities." Captain Nam's smile widened slightly. "Commander, we've been building radio, telescopes and scanning for artificial signals since we figured out the universe was bigger than our planet. When something started actively observing us from a fixed position in space, we noticed. The energy signature was subtle, but we're very good at finding things that don't belong." She paused, her expression becoming more serious. "We've also been preparing for this conversation since we realized we weren't alone. Our best minds have been working on translation matrices, cultural analysis, and diplomatic protocols. We hoped our first contact would be peaceful." "And if it wasn't?" Thekvarion asked. "Then we'd defend ourselves," Nam replied simply. "But we'd rather share chocolate." The simplicity of her statement carried more weight than any military threat. These humans possessed the capability to fight the entire galactic fleet, but they'd rather exchange gifts. They'd been classified as weapons, but they approached with art and food and friendship. Thekvarian looked at his scientific team, seeing his own realization reflected in their expressions. The nightmare classification had been both completely accurate and utterly wrong. Humans were indeed bioengineered weapons of impossible capability, but they were weapons that had chosen to become something else entirely. Slowly, deliberately, he reached for the energy barrier controls. His aide moved to stop him, but Thekvarian's expression made it clear the decision was final. The barriers powered down with a soft chime. "Captain Nam Sujin," he said formally, "the Galactic Council accepts your proposal for diplomatic relations. Perhaps we could start with that chocolate you mentioned." As the first human stepped forward to shake hands with an alien commander, everyone present realized they were witnessing the moment that would reshape galactic civilization. Humanity hadn't just achieved first contact, they'd achieved first friendship, and, in a universe full of weapons, that might be the most powerful force of all.